provided to the Co-Star, the official newspaper of the Borough of Belmar, and the Asbury Park Press on December 2nd, 2020, and notice of this meeting was posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building.
Thank you, Mayor. Everybody can join me in the flag
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Everybody could just remain standing for a moment of silence for our troops, their families, all our first responders. And since our last meeting, we had one of our retired police officers who spent a lot of time in Belmar, Andy Donate, worked up on the beach for us all summer, had passed away since our last meeting. Thank you. One thing I want to bring up before we get into one of the redevelopment projects is we had a contest in town for the Christmas lights, and I have to say that we really have a lot of people that really days they've done an excellent job. Decorated their houses are really make our town really look good. Our team did a wonderful job with this contest that they did for the Christmas light contest this year.
Talk to the microphone. You're going in and out.
Am I?
Double tap it, turn on and off.
How's that, Jeff?
Everyone else has their mics off?
So,
Okay.
yes, everybody did a great job. I really do appreciate it. And we do have 3 winners. We have Barry Trudeau from our Recreation Department, our Recreation Director. He's just going to go over some of the winners. Thanks, Barry.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. I just want to give a big thank you to all the businesses that donated. Brandles, Chefs International, Coffee Surf, Comfrey, Eastern Lines, Federico's, Klein's, Mike Subs, Norris by Nature, Pliables, Raging Cajun, and Sweet. With their generosity, we're able to give everyone that participated a gift card. So I will announce our first runner-up is Lynn and Tony Mieno. I apologize if I say the name wrong. In 3rd place was George Catterbrone. 2nd place was John Walsh. And our 1st place winner was Bill Renner. I will get the awards out to those winners along with our participants on Thursday. Okay, thank you so much.
Nice.
Thank you, Barry.
Very nice.
And thank you for everybody that signed up to be in the contest. It was great. All right, I guess the council we could sit down. We have a presentation from Sacrament Enterprises about a redevelopment project which is on the St. Rose property at 8th and Main that they want us to take a look at.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Karras. I'm the attorney for Sacrament Enterprises. Am I good here?
Yes, sir. Presentation.
You have a PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Council.
That's beyond my abilities.
I got it.
Just so we're clear, what we're talking about is on the St. Rose site, which is on Main Street, 8th Ave, Lot 75, lots 4, 5, and 6. It's a 30,000 square feet piece of property. What we're proposing is a multifamily with, depending upon the nature of the plan, we're seeking to develop some retail on the bottom. With that being said, our architect, Josh, are going to have him present the
Thanks, Andy. My name is Josh Eckert. I am an architect and town planner based out of Haddonfield, New Jersey. And we've been working on this project for the last couple of months for our client Sacrament Enterprises, as Andy had mentioned. The property as it currently exists is just a wide open site along Main Street. And it's a pretty prominent corner in town. When you come in off of 35, off of 8th Avenue, it's right on the intersection of Main Street and 8th. So it's really, as you're flying up here, as I was tonight coming up into your town, it was really the first intersection where you felt like you were in Belmar. And there's this wide open site that used to be a gas station and service station on the corner there. As it exists now, it's a grass parking lot, but there are some contamination issues on the site from when it was a service center. The first thing that we were tasked by SACMAN to do was to take a look at designing a building that would fit Belmar. We did a little bit of precedent research as far as some of the architecture in town. One of the things that's pretty typical for some New Jersey shore towns is the balconies. And you can kind of see that the building steps back. That was a combination between the recommendation of ours to create more open space, especially with the pandemic and everything, as well as the standards that are in the redevelopment plan from that Belmar has developed over the years. What we're looking at here is on the ground floor is a parking deck, so it's some heavy construction, and then 2.5 levels of residential over that podium, which is what we said the parking deck is. Tonight we're going to present 3 different options for the ground floor. With the project being along Main Street, our recommendation is that we have some sort of retail to activate the street. And again, when we look at these types of mixed-use buildings, we really want people to live and work in the buildings. It just makes a lot more livelier downtown. And in addition to the actual uses, we also tried to create a couple of focal points from an architectural standpoint. The corner that we're looking at here is the corner of Main Street and 8th Avenue in this location, on this side of the street. And when you come in again off of 35 onto 8th Avenue, that corner is really an important element. And so we want to create a sort of different architectural style on the corner there. Again, as far as the building heights that are required per the redevelopment plan, we adhere to all the standards for those. And then the choice of materials, again, we looked at some Belmar precedents to kind of use that as a sort of a basis for the architectural design style. This is a view of the building as we've designed it, basically put into context. So when you're standing across the corner, catty corner on 8th and Main, looking back towards our site, you can see again St. Rita's on the left-hand side, and then our site is in this location. The massing of the building, again, is a very important piece along Main Street, and we tried to actually blend it between what's on the right-hand side of the screen and then what's the church property here. Both of those are 3 stories, but again, when you're walking along the street, it's really what will feel like 2 stories, and then it steps back to a 3rd story, and then we have some dormers that have the half story and a half level up there. In the building, which we'll get into the site, the building plans in a little bit, on the corner up here is the amenity, the community amenity for the building. So any resident that lives in the building can go up to there and basically hang out in the corner and either work or enjoy the views along Main Street. This is an aerial view, again looking as if you're in a helicopter looking down at the site. So we have, the building is built all out to the street front on both sides along 8th Avenue and along Main. So this is Main Street at the bottom. Again, this is the church, and this is the building across the street. One of the things is that is a requirement as per the redevelopment plan, and just a good basis for design, is that we actually have this courtyard in the back that's elevated up above the parking garage. And again, there would be a community amenity, outdoor sitting areas and things like that, again, which I'll get into the plans. But again, we tried to break the building up as opposed to the building that's across the street, which technically is 3 stories, but they have a really high parapet. So it makes the building feel pretty tall. We changed the roof type and pushed the building back off of the Main Street as well. Again, kind of almost a combination or a reflection of both the church or the school and the building across the street. tried to soften that up just a little bit, so it's not a wall of building along Main Street. This is a view along 8th Avenue. One of the things that we're proposing in one of the options is actually angled parking along 8th Avenue to add an additional public parking. We can put more parking onto the site, again, which we'll get into the 3 options for the ground floor. We could put more parking under the building, but we think that then it would be basically reserved for residents and potential users of the retail. But one alternate, an option, is to put angled parking along the street. We pulled the building back a few feet from the actual property line, again, to allow for the cars to park at an angle here. We can pick up 8 more spaces along there than what's there currently. And it's not really a new thing. It actually happens across Main Street here, and it happens the same thing, the angled parking across the street, across 8th Avenue as well. These are the building elevations. And again, when we're talking specific building height, obviously it's to the peak of the roof. That's the tallest point of the building. There's the technical term of building height, but then there's the reality of what it looks like from the street, which is what we tried to show in the renderings, is that you can't actually see the peak of the roof, but despite that, we have to meet the requirements of the actual building height itself, which is here in this drawing. So we drew our building in context with the church and the school, as well as the building across 8th Avenue. And we're a little bit taller than the building across 8th Avenue, but again, the perceived height is actually, it feels like it's a 2.5-story building versus the 3-story building that's across the street. And again, the building height, this all adheres to the redevelopment plan standards and requirements as per the city, as per the town. So this is actually the site plan, the ground floor plan here, and we'll have 3 different options for this. This is the ground floor plan, and next to that is the second floor plan. So this is a level up on the right, and this is at grade on the left. Main Street is running sort of north-south here, and 8th Avenue is running east-west on the bottom here. According to the redevelopment plan, we need to have 2 parking spaces per unit on site, and this meets that. So we're not showing any retail along Main Street in this instance, just to meet the parking requirement. But we do have a residential lobby. Obviously, you need to get upstairs, so we have a residential lobby with an elevator on the ground floor plan. And in the elevations, you can kind of see where that is with this element that pops up here. So that serves as the residential entry. And that's meant to be designed so that's an entry feature on the building. And so we have basically a parking deck on the ground floor with the required egress stairs in the back. And then up above, the yellow units are 1-bedroom units, and the orange units are 2-bedroom units. Grand total, we have a total of 45 total units for the whole project. 28 1-bedrooms and 17 2-bedrooms. And for, again, this parking on site, we're at 90 total spaces on site. This is an option 2 for the ground floor plan. Again, the second floor plan stays the same in all these options, but we're showing just an option 2 discussed with the town to see what is preferred from one way or the other, with retail along the ground floor. This is showing a little over 4,700 square feet of retail. Some of that space will get eaten up by mechanical spaces and trash rooms and things like that, but it'll be approximately probably closer to 4,500 square feet at the end of the day. And again, 4,500, we don't have any specific tenants or even really thoughts on tenants, but it's a good number as far as the depth of the retail. It's a flexible space for restaurants or shops or anything. Again, we haven't really discussed types of retail or anything, but we like this plan in that it provides some retail along Main Street and will activate the street. Now, obviously, the downside to this is we only get 73 spaces on site. But again, if in this instance, if we do the angled parking, we'll have an additional 8 spaces that anybody could use on the ground floor here, and we'll pick up 2 spaces where there's a curb cut currently along Main Street. So overall, we'd be at 91 total on-site and on-street spaces, of which 83 are new spaces. And then the third option, which is sort of a hybrid between the first option where it's all parking on the ground floor and then retail that's all along Main Street. This gets 81 spaces on site, but then it also has the 12 spaces angled parking along 8th Avenue as well. And again, the total number of spaces on this one is 97 total spaces for 45 units in the retail. We're doing a lot of these types of projects around this region, the Philadelphia region, the North Jersey region. Most of our parking as far as the actual use, tends to be about 1.3 to 1.4 as far as number of parking spaces per unit for this type of projects. It's mixed use, urban. The requirement obviously is two per unit in the redevelopment plan, but we have a lot of one bedrooms here, 28 units. We just don't anticipate the type of yield requiring two, but we have a plan that meets that specific requirement as per the town's requirements. The upper floors, we have again, the yellow are one bedrooms and the orange are two bedrooms. And then on the corner of 8th and Main, it's a little hard left-handed, we have the amenity space, which is the purple space. All the units on the upper floor, with the exception of the two that are on the end, are actually loft units. They're two-level units. So you have a loft space with a bedroom and a master suite. Well, if it's a two-bedroom, you'll have a bedroom up there. If it's one bedroom, you'll have a bedroom up there as well. And the living space is basically on the ground floor. So it's a really nice, livable unit with walkability and everything. The building has elevators as per building codes for accessibility as well. And then in the back, I had mentioned that it would have an outdoor amenity space, basically amenity deck on that first level above the parking. And this is just a quick layout for that, where the individual units in the back on the ground floor, essentially the ground floor, on the first floor, would have their own private terraces. And then there's barbecues and grill areas and just areas to sit. We may have fire pits and that type of thing. And then we also have some landscaping up there and a buffer. The school is back here, the church and school is back here. So we're showing some landscaping and a pergola back there to kind of soften and give a little bit of a buffer between our project and the church as well. So that is the project in a nutshell. Again, we're at 4,500 or 45 units, and then options for up to 4,500 square feet of retail with parking and everything as well. So turn it over to Ann.
Thank you. A few things to keep in mind. These units are intended based upon the finishes in the units and also the design of the unit as luxury apartment units. One other thing to consider, there is recently a statute passed in New Jersey having to do with electrical vehicle parking, EV parking, where you're entitled to a credit by putting EV spaces in, 2 per 1, credit of 2 for each space that's created for EV, up to 10%. I have our planner, Dave Roberts, who's very familiar with Belmar and the redevelopment plan, the Seaport redevelopment plan. Dave?
Thank you. Just briefly, a little bit of background. Probably my first involvement in Belmar was in 2002. At the time, I was with the firm of Short Palma, and we did the original Seaport area redevelopment area designation. That was back when the high-span bridge had not yet been built yet. So it was in anticipation of that. In 2003, which is the first date you'll see on the cover of the Seaport redevelopment plan, was when that plan was originally adopted. And some of you folks that remember the sort of things that were happening at that period of time, the original Seaport plan had anticipated a fairly large, ambitious, sort of holistic approach. And then as the economy changed and we went through some peaks and valleys with the economic issues in town, and the key of the term of master redeveloper actually was invented in Belmar. And it was meant to allow for one redeveloper to kind of coordinate individual projects on individual smaller sites owned by others. And at the time, the thought was to give property owners opportunities to redevelop their own properties, but have a kind of a master blueprint that was controlled by an experienced developer with the wherewithal to be able to coordinate that. When that fell apart, the plan was amended. You'll notice on the cover of the plan, there's amendments, several amendments over the last 13 years that I was involved. And then I believe the last one was in 2016, which is the last one I did before I went in back into the public sector. So I'm currently now the township planner in Tom's River. But my experience with, and the area went through several changes. One of the key things that involves this project is that when it became clear that we needed to make the plan adaptable for smaller projects, and probably the first of those was the one right on the opposite corner of this site. And part of the reason was that initially it was always anticipated that all of these mixed-use developments would have parking, internalized parking. And they would need bigger parcels in order to be able to do that. And the initial concepts of the Seaport Plan, going back to its origins, was a recognition that in a downtown like we have here, there are going to be larger sites and smaller sites. And the smaller sites are going to be challenged when it comes to providing parking. And we also were, that plan focuses and still does on the combination of public parking and private parking on site, public parking off site, and sharing parking within a downtown area, and that's why there's a 25% shared parking standard if you combine retail and residential. In other words, daytime weekday uses with evening weekend uses. So that has always been a cornerstone of the plan. There was actually a parking structure anticipated back behind Town Hall here in the corner. That was where it was originally proposed, and the parking lot behind Borough Hall here was always meant to be a large public parking lot, which is pretty much what its purpose it serves today. But there was always that combination. But we wanted to make it adaptable to smaller properties, and that's what a lot of the design standards that are in the plan came from. One of the first projects that got built did not have parking structures. One of the reasons is because internalized internal parking is more expensive to build, especially if there's a deck. So that first project was built with surface parking, and that's the property on the opposite corner. What we did want, though, was to incentivize internalized parking, and that's one of the reasons why there's a different set of standards for buildings that have internalized parking versus buildings that have surface parking. And that's one of the things that Josh was just describing, was the setbacks that were applied to this site were based on internalized parking. There was also a intention to encourage that, because if you noticed when Josh kind of gave you a tour around the building, you don't see any of the parking from the public realm. In other words, from 8th Avenue or Main Street, you don't see the public parking. It's actually even concealed from the other sides where the outdoor amenity area is kind of enclosed by that building. So as compared to other developments that we have in the borough that have used surface parking, where the surface parking is visible from at least one of the public streets that the property fronts on. So there was an incentive, or at least an adaptation built into the redevelopment plan that goes back to the very beginning, that basically said that if you internalize your parking and you provide for the to back up just a step, it was always presumed that if we were going to have shared parking, if we were going to try to develop a building, something like what you've already seen built in town, and a concept like this on a given size piece of property, that we may not be able to get all the building and all the parking on the same property. So that's why there was this provision for shared parking and also for on-street, off-street combinations. And most of the developments that have occurred in town have some sort of a mix of either on-site parking or street parking in the area. In this particular case, the assumption was that the residents would want to be parking on-site, and that the retail users could park within the general parking framework of the downtown. They pretty much, there are many commercial properties still in town that don't have any parking of their own at all, and totally rely on parking within the downtown where you would walk from place to place. That's a typical downtown style. So the plan said that if you provided internal parking and reserved it for the residents of the building, that you were exempt from the FAR, and that was because the parking deck takes up building space. So that was a standard that we tried to design to. My role in this situation, since I left my last firm, the last time I was involved with the borough was in 2016, 5 years ago, was I was brought on board by SACMAN to kind of explain the plan, help them, give them feedback on the various evolution of the plan, and that's what we've been doing over the last year or so together. And this is really the final product that we think now has responded to most of the borough's concerns. And I feel that one of the other things, one of my other observations is, remember the name of the redevelopment area is the Seaport redevelopment area. And the vision going back to 2003 was to try to create infill development within the downtown that would activate the streets, provide some additional residential capacity in the downtown to have more of a 24/7 downtown, but also there was a lot of emphasis on a seaport type theme. And one of the observations I would make about the way that this design has evolved is if you compare the roof lines and a lot of the other features, the inside-outside spaces, the ability to recreate outside, whether it's a balcony or whether it's a amenity space, is fairly unique among the other developments that we've seen so far, where most of what we've seen are flat roof buildings with parapets for them, and which are it's okay because it provides for an eclectic combination of architecture which looks more authentic in a traditional downtown. But in this particular building, I think the seaport theme is brought out by the use of all the gable roofs and the differentiation in the facades. In contrast to that, I noticed the two developments that were approved by the planning board since 2016. Since the plan was last amended, one of them's on 10th, and I noticed driving by there on the way here today, you don't see a lot of that articulation of the facades as you cross the front of that building. That building also has 90 parking spaces, ironically, on the ground level. So we hope that we can come up with a good hybrid mix of combination of retail, having the right amount of parking, and I think the new electronic vehicle standards that have just been inserted not only into the municipal land use law but into the local redevelopment housing law provide an opportunity to get the right balance and to come up with probably what I would say, in my own opinion, is if not the most attractive project in town, certainly ranking up among them based on the other redevelopment projects that you have. And that was really just my purpose, was to explain some of the background and kind of how we got to this point.
Thank you. And that's all we have for our presentation. Are there any questions?
I know we heard a lot of information on this project, and I know Jen and Jerry have been working on it, so I'd like to hear a little bit from them. You know, what are they meeting the standards of the redevelopment, and what are the issues there that you guys find?
So we've been engaged with the prospective developer for what now, almost a year and a half? At least a year. On this site and going back and forth over their proposal. I just want to say a couple things that while I appreciate the history associated with the redevelopment plan, this administration has taken interpretation of various elements of said plan and have been consistent in that implementation. First being, because this fronts on Main Street, that it's intended to be a mixed-use project. That the ground floor on Main Street is intended for retail, restaurant, those types of uses, which would differentiate this site from other sites that are farther to the west that are not specifically on Main Street. Secondly, we have also taken the position consistently that all residential parking must be provided on site. If that is not adhered to, the application would have to comply with the FAR. Providing the retail, and I also want to state that parking spaces on the street do not count towards off-street parking, that they're on-street parking, and I can appreciate the capturing of additional on-street parking spaces by creating a diagonal parking space, but that does not go against any prospective applications on-street, off-street parking requirements. The project that's been proposed to us over the course of the past year has been a mixed-use project, cannot or has not provided all the residential parking spaces on the property itself, off the street. In addition, it does not comply with the FAR. So they can have it one way or the other. I understand that the RSIS allows for visitor spots to be just not located on site, they can be located off site, and if the prospective developer wants to avail themselves of that opportunity, that's perfectly within their right. However, they would then have to comply with the FAR, which is 1.5. Right now, as shown, and it's a very nice looking building, I'm not going to disagree, the site does not comply. So they would either need to reduce the scale of the building or the project to enable them to comply with either the parking requirement or the FAR. Ideally, it would be both, but I understand that the on-site parking in the garage area takes up some space, so I do understand why that standard has been employed. But currently, as proposed as a mixed use, which is the position that we've taken along Main Street consistently, it does not comply with the requirements.
Okay, thank you. I mean, going through the project and taking a look at it, I mean, definitely, we want the retail along Main Street. Some of the big issues that I know we have, and I talked to the police department about, is that angle parking on 8th Avenue. That is a major street coming out of Belmar into a state highway. And I know even though we have angle parking on other streets in the area, that 8th Avenue is not that wide. And especially I can see that causing a problem. So I would want input from the police department on how that's going to be handled. But I mean, looking at the project, like you said, the building, the look of the building is nice. There was a nice design to it. But I think the way to make this project work, it has to be reduced by units, so the parking works, and they can keep the setback away from the back lot, because it's on the east side of Main Street, and that we've been consistent with that all along, is trying to keep it away from the back property line. Even though I know that the Seaport redevelopment allows that, and that's one of the things that we're talking about with the planners now, is to change that east side, so it doesn't have to be right up on top of different residential areas. So I'll let some of the other council members talk to see what their thoughts are on it.
You know, Mr. Mayor. Oops. You know what, if it doesn't have enough parking, I can't support it. Absolutely. And honestly, I mean, the idea of even only including half of the retail space, it just doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Council President?
I agree with Tom and the mayor. When I first saw the building is very pretty.
Yeah, it is pretty.
The parking on 8th Avenue, it is narrow. Right now, we have the side parking on the south side of 8th Avenue, and when they start to back out, it's a jam. So it's really not going to work, that side parking. Okay.
Councilman Corbelli?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think the parking is important. This is the first time I'm getting a look at it, but yeah, I concur.
Councilman McCarthy?
I guess this train is heading in the same direction. I'm very concerned about the parking. I believe it should all be on site. I definitely would want to see retail all along Main Street and not a portion of that area. I think putting this angled parking on 8th Avenue, which is a very busy street, and narrowing the street is only a recipe for disaster. And again, you know, we're just getting this plan for the first time as well, but I also don't like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, depending on the design, or so spaces underneath the building that are, I don't know what the exact term is, tandem parking, but you park one car in. And I think, you know, we all know no one does that. I mean, if you have a double spot like that, you know, that's not a spot that someone is going to put 2 cars. If they do, you know, be very unusual. Usually those areas become storage in the front and the other car in the back. So, you know, it looks like, you know, narrowing 8th Avenue and putting that angle parking in there is not a good idea. And it looks like that this building doesn't meet the parking. I know we've taken that into consideration in some minor spots in other parts of town, but I think we need to be very keen about the realities of this part of town. We already have a high school there that generates traffic with students when they're in school and is short on parking. So frankly, what I'd like to see is any developer come in the project here be able to relieve some of the parking on the streets that goes in front of residents' houses now where students park, so they can have off-street parking on the site too. So I mean, I'd like to go one step further, and I'll just say it's not enough, but it would be great if we could relieve some of those other parking issues as well.
Thank you. And I know that they didn't take into consideration where the trash would go or anything like that, so it's going to be short parking spaces there. But I think the only way this project could move, even be taken a look at it, has to have the number of units reduced. Jen, did you take a look at that? And
I haven't evaluated what number would work on the site. I'd be more than happy to work with their professionals to come up with a number that would be able to be parked while providing the necessary retail along Main Street. I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I forgot to mention this. You mentioned they were luxury apartments. Currently, we have 646 apartments or rental units in town. That does include some retail. 659 condos and 1,542 single-family homes. You know, I know the rental market is hot right now. I know we have a waiting list at some of our other buildings, but you know, I also think that if this building were condos, it would bring more permanent people to town with a vested interest in our community, whether it be seasonal or not seasonal, and you know, potentially have a better rateable impact on our town. Although I know that's, you know, subject to type of unit of the department as well, but yeah, that's another concern I have about it.
Okay, thank you. So right now, the consensus is the project's a no-go unless there's big changes. Is that correct? Okay, just so you guys know, thanks.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I don't know if you want me to introduce myself.
Yeah, just give us your name and I know you're part of the firm. But
Yeah, my name is Carter Sackman. I'm president of Sackman Enterprises, the developer on the project that's being presented tonight. What I just wanted to ask, just as a follow-up, so there's a little more direction than I have. There was no mention of, you know, when we go back and forth, because we can certainly be more than happy to redesign things, look at alternatives. We're looking at this, there's also the state, which we had mentioned earlier, passed electric vehicle credit. It's our understanding there's a 10% credit across the board on the calculation of the number of spaces that needs to be provided. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. We go back, my professionals go back, they redesign, I come back before the board, and there's a miscommunication. That's our interpretation of the state law that just got recently passed. And I'd like to hear the view of the town.
So, again, that was your interpretation of it, but that was a brand new law, and the legislative haven't even found a location where they're gonna plug that into the local redevelopment law yet. It's still just considered whatever the public law designation was. So it's still being interpreted, it's still being applied, and we're still essentially waiting on guidance on how it's going to be applicable to a redevelopment application, or whether or not it's 10% across the board, or if it's parking that's not to exceed 10% of the available. So that's kind of where there's a little bit of a gray area. So it's essentially the professionals are going to have to talk about it, iron it out, and do some research. So there's no definitive answer, yes, no, or another way that anybody can give you right now.
So the town is not aware if they're willing to give a credit of 10% for vehicle hookups. That's the answer right now.
No, the borough, not the town, is
Oh, the borough.
aware of the EV credit, but the extent of it is still left to interpretation, which hasn't been ironed out. Because it has been ironed out in minor and major subdivision applications. That stuff, that's exceptionally clear, but this is now we're dealing with the redevelopment law, which is a whole other beast of body of law to deal with.
So my question would just be, so I'm just, again, it sounds like you're saying that based on the gray area that we're entered into with EV credit in its present state, that you would not recognize the 10% at this point.
I'm not saying we wouldn't recognize something, because that would be putting words in my mouth. What I'm telling you is
I just want a little direction.
Well, the direction will come after the professionals have an opportunity to fully investigate it, rather than shooting from our hip as we're doing right now. So it's something that we have to look into. It's something that we as professionals, your attorney can reach out to me, your professionals can reach out to Jen and Jerry, and it's something that we can work out and see if there's something that we can come up with to make it as a compliant plan to comply with the EV regulation, in addition to the Seaport redevelopment plan.
And just as far as reserving spaces on site, is the intention that those spaces be reserved for residential?
Yes.
So if I'm creating 2 spaces per unit, the idea is that those 2 spaces can solely be reserved for a residential occupant.
What the redevelopment plan says is that you have to park 100% of your residential obligation on site, which is 2 per. If you provide additional parking for your businesses or what have you, that's up to you. But you have to have at least your residential obligation parked on site or comply with the FAR.
I'm just talking about utilizing the spaces after the building's been put in service.
Yeah, they would have to be residentially designated parking spaces, yes.
So in essence, because I deal with this, I'm a developer in Asbury, I see how that's managed there. It sounds very similar. I just want to confirm that what's being said is that if I'm creating, call it 2 spaces per unit, that has a residential reservation to it. It's not to be utilized for any other purpose.
Correct.
Is that accurate?
Yes.
That's all I'm asking. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you guys for coming.
Okay. The only other thing I want to bring up, we have on for second reading tonight is that you guys noticed that there's a change in the pricing for tourism. And what we're doing with that is we're changing around the way we're going to be funding the BBP. We're spreading it out to all the people that use the tourism, that basically who's ever, like the bars, the restaurants, summer rentals, all that. We spread all the different pricing out to all the people that rely on the tourism, everything that we do for tourism. And there was an issue with some of the way the funding was for the BBP and some of the different funding that we did through tourism. So we're bringing it all into one, and we rearranged all the pricing, which doesn't I mean, the residents don't have to worry about it. The businesses, a lot of the businesses that were paying a lot of money along Main Street now, it gets spread out through summer rentals, I'll take for instance, Marina Grill and 9th Avenue Pier never paid in to the BVP because they were really a rental of the town. So now they are, the way we rearranged it, they would have to pay in. So it smooths it out and makes it equal for everybody, and we're going to be funding BVP and a lot of the tourism things that we do. So that's on for second reading tonight, just so you guys know what we're voting on. Anybody have any questions on that? All right, that's all I have. Anybody else have anything? Okay, on the petition. Do we have anything?
No, I did not receive any petitions.
Approval of the minutes, December 7th.
Can I have a motion to approve the December 7th minutes?
Motion.
Second.
Councilman Brennan?
Yes.
Councilman Long?
Yes.
Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Councilman McCracken?
Yes.
Councilman Carvelli?
Yes. Reports of council. Councilman Corbell.
Thank you, Mayor. Two things. Planning board met last week. The only thing on their agenda was to review the ordinance that's amending the Seaport redevelopment to make sure that it doesn't conflict with the master plan. And substantially, they found that that was the case. And also the financial committee met. They're looking to engage a consultant to assess the value of the water and sewer as we move that effort forward. Those are the two things that I have to report, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilman McCracken.
Thank you, Mayor. The Shade Tree Commission met last week. A lot of great people in that group who work hard, who very much care about this town and how it looks. And they're moving forward with various projects and initiative, including the National Shade Tree designation, which is moving forward. Other than that, obviously we've had an opportunity on the council here for the last 2 weeks to solicit comments from the public, do a lot of research, and think a lot about ordinances that are introduced at first reading and come to second reading where we can have public comment and get more input. So that's added a lot of that's taken a lot of time to do that research and get into a comfortable place on those types of things. I think it's important to say that at this time of year, it's really time to embrace your neighbor, get to know your neighbor, and celebrate the wonderful gifts that we have coming up. And with that, I'd just like to wish everybody a safe, peaceful, and loving Christmas and holiday season, whichever you celebrate, and certainly a safe, healthy, and prosperous 2022.
Thank you. Councilman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Real quick, the Environmental Commission did not have the meeting because they canceled it so they could attend the Borough Employee/Volunteer Party, which was a lovely event. Very, very nice. Well, thank you for that. The Harbor Commission did have a meeting. We're still working on a capital improvements plan, but one thing I want to point out, we were actually blessed to have 4 members of the public, 4 slip holders, both private and commercial, there, and it was really very helpful to have them there for their feedback. They made us aware of some issues that we had not been aware of, and I would encourage anybody who uses the marina, particularly if you are a slip holder or leaseholder, to attend the second Tuesday of the month right here at Borough Hall, attend the Harbor Commission. Thanks. That's my report.
Thank you. Council President Wong.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I talk to you this evening, I believe there was something about COVID shots
given it Taylor, oh, you have it. Oh, look at that. Is that a great mayor or what? Borough of Belmar, in partnership with Monmouth County Health Department, is holding a COVID-19 vaccine clinic on January 12th, 2022. Wow. The county will be offering all 3 vaccines, first and second doses, as well as boosters for adults and children ages 5 and up. The clinic will be held from 1 to 4 at the Taylor Pavilion. So if anybody needs their shot, this is great. As this is going to be my last meeting, it's kind of bittersweet. Yeah. I just want to thank everybody who voted for me 3 years ago. It has been an honor to serve the town that I love so much. It's been an honor working with Tom, Jim, Tom here, and of course the mayor. Everybody involved, everybody at Borough Hall, John, DPW, police force. Couldn't have asked for a better group of people serving you, honestly. I have to say that. Our mayor, who I've given gray hair to, I'm sure, over the 3 years. He has done so much for you. I wish I could express to you, his goal, it seems, in life is to do the best he can for Belmar. He gets the biggest kick out of saving 10,000 here. I know it may not sound like a lot, but those 10,000s add up. And a few dollars here, it's just what he wants to do for our town. I can't be more proud of him and more thankful working with you, Mark. It has been remarkable, and everybody here. April, you too. What would I do without you? My goodness. And just one more thing. The big guy at the end of the dais. The first time I met him, I was wondering, who is this fast-talking character? And I was a little intimidated, I must say, at first. But over the 3 years, I have to tell you, nobody has a bigger heart. He probably doesn't want me to say this. No one has a bigger heart or is the kind of person. Just don't go by the way he speaks. He works 24/7 for you. I get text messages at 6 o'clock in the morning or 11 o'clock at night. He's always there. So I have to, sorry if I embarrassed you a little, but I had to say it. Thanks. You worked so hard for us. Thank you. And I thank everybody very, very much for allowing me to do this for you. May you have a blessed, healthy, happy New Year, Merry Christmas, and I'll see you around town. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President Juan. Yeah, we are definitely going to miss her. She did a lot of work for us, really worked hard. You might not embarrass that, but you did me. I mean, it's just things that I do. But I thank you for all those compliments and those kind words. We're going to miss you. You did a lot for us on the council. You were always there, almost every meeting, except for when you had knee surgery. But yeah, thank you for everything. I know you're not going anywhere because we keep tapping when we call for other things. So, but thank you for everything you did. We're going to miss you. I got a couple of things. I want to thank the police department and DPW. What a great event they put on, delivering all the toys to the kids. That was, the kids really enjoyed it. We had a lot of people sign up this year. Great event, and you know, not many other towns do that. And so, John, thank you. I know the police department isn't here tonight, but I already thank them, but they did a great job. The only other thing that I have is I just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and great New Year, safe, healthy. I know we still have cases coming up with COVID, so whatever you're doing this holiday, try to do it safely. And yeah, I want to wish you the best. All right, on the public session, on any of the resolution items. Yes, Mr. Kramer.
Gene Kramer, 4th Avenue. Just a quick question. This resolution 2021-257, resolution appointing and confirming a professional service contract for environmental services. basic question is there something that occurred in town or something that has come up that we have to go out and engage an environmental consultant?
This is Administrator Kirschbaum. I know we've talked a lot about a lot of different things on professional services. What do we need?
This is for looking for a future home for EMS.
That's what it's for, yeah. This is for, we're looking at a different piece of property to house the EMS, and we want to make sure that there's no contaminants or anything like that on the property before we look further into it. So we hired a professional to take a look at all the environmental, if there's any environmental issues before we get involved in it.
Oh, okay, good. I just, the way that it was worded, that you're hiring an environmental consultant, but, and I'm sure our borough engineers can certainly handle a lot of this thing. But if you need a specialist or something to do site investigation, clean up, that sort of thing, I'm all in favor of it.
Okay, thanks.
Sherry Russo, 1218 Bryward Road, Belmar. Can we ask where that property is? Was it on there and I missed it?
We should probably have something for you in the January meeting coming up, because we're just looking at different sites, so, you know, I can tell you many different things, but we're not sure.
I'm sorry, can you just repeat the last 3 words? You can
I said we're looking at a few different sites, so, you know, I don't want to say which one, we're just checking a few of them out, just to see where we think we're going to house EMS.
And it's still-
But we should have some by January.
And it's still up for contractual negotiations, so
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
appropriate for public
Yeah, we
disclosure
really can't say.
at this time.
No, I wasn't sure if I just missed something. I'm not asking for more than. All right,
Yeah,
thank you.
Hopefully by the January meeting.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, April?
Okay, can I have a motion to close the public session?
Motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
And can I have a motion to approve the resolutions as listed on the consent agenda?
Second.
Okay, Councilman Brennan?
Yes.
Councilwoman Vaughn? Yes. Mayor Lucifer?
Yes.
Councilman McCracken?
Yes.
Councilman Carvelli?
Yes.
Next is second reading and public hearing on ordinance 2021-36. This is an ordinance amending the Seaport redevelopment zone. Before we open it to public comment, for those that are present, I have a couple that I received by email from people that could not attend that I'd like to read into the record. First one is from Krista Sperber of 512.5 8th Avenue. Her comment was, I am completely opposed to this amendment to the plan that would allow a larger building with increased impervious coverage. This is irresponsible development at a time when we need to be building smarter, mitigating against future flooding losses, and reducing flooding for families in low-lying neighborhoods. It is the responsibility of the borough to be actively working to improve our community credit rating and maintain affordable flood insurance rates for our residents, as well as our neighbors and surrounding towns. Building a larger structure in a floodplain will negatively impact our rating by increasing our risk of flood damages as a whole. The mitigation planning process under the CRS specifically states that it is intended to build partnerships, a risk reduction involving government organizations, businesses, and the public. The floodplain manager should be weighing in on any and all development in a flood zone and its impact to our residents. It is the responsibility of the borough to act in the best interest of its residents. This flies in the face of that and directly impacts our lowest lying neighborhoods by increasing stormwater runoff to an area that already struggles with flooding during high tide cycles. It is irresponsible for the borough to consider any development that will increase our risk, increase our flood insurance premiums, and increase flooding to its residents. I did respond to her email and tell her that the plan only affects the height and not the impervious coverage, and that I did advise her that our floodplain administrator has been involved and will continue to be involved once an application is officially submitted. And then the next one is from Karen Carew of 110 4th Avenue. She stated that her concern is that if you change zoning rules for the Mediterranean project, you are setting precedent for all future development. Belmar is a family town and does not need this huge complex of 5 stories. We do not want to be a clone of Pier Village in Long Branch. She then had some questions. Have you considered Belmar's flood risk rating? Have you analyzed potential problems of density and traffic? Have you considered the negative effect on the Main Street businesses? And then she said, this rule changes should definitely not be approved until those concerns have been thoroughly researched. So I did advise her that she could view the last meeting and the initial presentation that was done earlier in the year, because a lot of those questions I think might have been asked and answered. So she said she would look into that. And then the last one is from Bill Young. It states, I've been following the Russo development on Route 35 between 10th and 8th Avenues and love the entire project. The developer is transforming several dated buildings on a state highway next to an active rail system into a first-class neighborhood. I credit them with blending various building heights and including ample parking as part of their overall concept. I am confident the developer will propose sensible traffic solutions, and let's face it, when this town has traffic in the summer, people are spending money. The housing component will bring residents that will spend money, revenue generation at Hook, Beckman's, Taylor Hardware, Triple Green, 7-Eleven, Flames, Anchor, etc. The businesses I mentioned are all Main Street operators. I vote yes on amending the Borough's Seaport redevelopment plan. This allows sensible development that results in revenue generation, not taxation.
Okay, thank you.
And so if anyone that's present would like to comment on the ordinance, please step forward, state your name and address.
And this ordinance, just so you know, is just for height only. It has nothing to do with parking, nothing to do with setbacks. That all has to be in compliant. Everything else has to be in compliant. This is just for height. So if you have questions or comments on that.
Yeah, so I mean, do you want to
I'm
jump?
sorry. Mr. Mayor, I just want to also add, it also eliminates a few uses that are no longer applicable for the zoning. I believe it adds a few as well,
It
correct?
doesn't add any, it
It
just
just
takes away
eliminates.
those that are appropriate if you're actually on the waterfront, like kayak rentals and those marinas and those types of things that would be inappropriate at this location. But again, I want to reiterate the mayor's comment that number one, this is not a development application, and while we've seen a presentation, and I understand some concerns that the public has brought up, there has been no application formally made to the governing body, nor has there been an application made to the planning board. So what this is just simply a ordinance that would modify this portion of the redevelopment plan to allow for the height to go from 52 feet to 60 feet, 4 stories to 5 stories, and to modify the use list as I had indicated.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lippincott.
Ed Lippincott, 305 4th Avenue, Belmar. Also chair of the Belmar Environmental Commission. I was here at the first reading, and there's a lot said about the, whatever the flaws of the original Seaport redevelopment. The one thing about that plan, which was written a long time ago, I understand, but there was a lot of public input before that plan was ever developed. And there was no public input about this change. So our last environmental commission meeting was canceled because of the holiday party, so we even haven't had a chance to go over this, which is part of our whole reason for being, is to look at plans like this.
Well, this isn't the application.
Yeah.
This
I
is
understand.
it could be any developer, not him. I mean, we're going to allow at that parcel 8 foot higher, as long as the setbacks and are right, the parking is right, everything else has to be correct on it. It's just the height.
And I also, Mr. Mayor, if I could just...
And there's, like they said, there's no application even applied for yet. So they gave us their overall view of it. We're just saying that we'll allow the height, everything else has to comply. But yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that this is completely outside your commission's jurisdiction at this stage, because amendment to a redevelopment plan is very straightforward. There's the first reading, then it goes to the planning board only for a consistency hearing, and then it goes back for second reading. It doesn't get presented to the Environmental Commission under any circumstance for this form of an amendment to a redevelopment zone. Now, once a redevelopment...
I understand all this, because what will happen is we get another chance to look at it, TDRC.
Correct.
And then at the planning board.
Correct.
I understand all that. But my point is that I don't think, if you vote yes on this tonight, we don't get to like do over. If this does get to the planning board and the TDRC, it's...
Before it even gets to the planning board and the TRC, we still have to designate a redeveloper, and then we have to come up with a redevelopment plan a redevelopment agreement, which essentially outlines all the requirements of what their project is going to have to entail. And then once that redevelopment agreement is executed by a resolution of this borough council, then essentially that redeveloper will have a chance to present an application to the TRC and the planning board. So we've got several steps that we have to do before we get there.
Okay, I'm not sure that this calms my fears. So, and I'm sure some other people, given the fact that it's the week before Christmas, I'm sure there's a lot of people that would like to be here that aren't.
Okay.
So, but I'll wait to see what the rest of the people have to say as well. Okay, thank you for your time.
Mark Levis, 904 13th Ave. I understand that this amendment, there's no application for any project, but you guys are doing this amendment based on the presentation that you saw for the project. And the second they came to you and said, we want to put underground parking there to fulfill the requirements, that should have been a dead deal. Because this property is in a flood zone, is it not?
We're not even discussing that. This is just for height. Everything else
I
has to
understand,
be,
but
everything
the
else,
property is in a flood zone.
everything else has to be.
You are not allowed to build underground parking in a flood zone.
But you're misunderstanding what's actually happening right now before...
I understand what they're voting on, because I
No, you do not,
understand
because if you
why-
understood what was...
I'd
No,
like to
please allow me to
address the
finish.
council.
Please allow me to finish. If you understood what was happening, you would realize that this is only an amendment to the existing Seaport... No, I'm not done. This is an amendment to the existing Seaport redevelopment plan to add 8 feet in height, to permit 5 stories where 4 was previously permitted, and to eliminate a few uses. That's it. As far as whether or not there's going to be parking underground, unless you have a crystal ball, that's not what's going to happen. That's not here. That's not presented. That was what was put up on the slide by a prospective redeveloper who hasn't even been given a redevelopment designation.
So why are we amending the Seaport redevelopment plan, if not to do it for this developer?
Because as was presented at the previous meeting, nothing has been done.
So
we're changing it to
we have
meet the
2 council
times.
members who are allowed to vote no on an ordinance because of the presentation they saw from the developer, but we're not allowed to make comments based on the same presentation that we saw.
That's
The
what you're doing
council is
right
trying to
now.
amend this ordinance to suit the needs of the developer. That's the only reason. And when you see the developer trying to put underground parking in a flood zone, you should say, these guys don't know what they're talking about.
So if I could just, I'm not discounting your concerns, I totally understand your concerns, I'm not also disagreeing that it's in a flood zone, it 100% is. But what I'm saying is, and it's gonna be the same comment I made to the prior presentation, if you can't park it, it's not happening. So
why are we wasting our
respectfully,
time?
listen, I sat and listened to a lot of things that are going on, and so what I'm gonna say is this. This is a process, this is a public hearing from which a record has to be created that's appropriate to what we're doing here. I get it. You guys are very upset about the presentation and what the prospective application could potentially be. It's not yet. And so I just need to, you have to focus. I understand you don't like underground parking. I've written that down, and that's information that if this process moves forward and a redeveloper is selected and an application is submitted, which I would submit to you probably won't happen for 12 to 18 months if the board of the council acts affirmatively tonight, then that's the appropriate time to bring it up. That comment, while it's important, is not appropriate for what's being proposed. The proposal is to go from...
I understand what's being
I
proposed.
understand that you say that, but yet you're still commenting on something that hasn't yet happened.
Well, the council just turned down a proposal that we saw at workshop discussion. right?
I understand that,
Because it
but-
didn't have enough parking. And now
But
we're
you
talking
can't,
about
you
an
can't
underground
marry
parking
the two, respectfully.
presentation,
This
and
is
they're
a
still allowing it
process.
to go
The
forward.
law requires that we have a public hearing on what's being proposed.
I understand.
What you're commenting on has not been proposed.
My public comment, it hasn't been proposed, I guess not formally, but we all saw a presentation at the last meeting that looked pretty much like the proposal. And it
Well,
looks
Mark,
like,
the reason why we took a look at the 8th and Main, these developers come to us, they listen to all our comments, and they take it back. We told the last presentation at the last meeting about the parking, everything. We're not going to allow anything. They've worked the whole project in to meet the Seaport redevelopment, except for 8 feet at the top. So the question before the council is, would we allow them 8 foot more on 35 highway? That's the question behind it. As far as everything else is gonna be talked about. Everything else is gonna be scrutinized. The only thing we're saying is, okay, we're gonna allow the extra story in the back by the train station because it's down on 35 highway. Now, the project that came before us tonight didn't have enough parking. We don't like the angle parking on 8th. So we told them, either they go back, they redesign it to meet the needs that we need in Belmar and come back before us, or they walk away from the project. It's the same thing we did with the Mediterranean. They heard all our concerns.
but none of you brought up the concern
Our
on
planners
the
beat them up so bad to put it into where we need it to be. Now, if it gets to a point where the underground parking don't work, they don't have the parking, so they can't build it. They won't have the parking.
That's the point it's gonna get to, because we have an ordinance on the
But
record that
if
says
there's
we're
another
not allowed to
developer
do
that
it.
comes along and he says, well, I could do it all because you raised it the 8 feet, I could do the whole project. We're looking at the 8 feet, that's what we're looking
But
at.
why do we want 8 feet so badly?
Do you have a problem with 8 feet?
Yeah, I do. I have no problem with the
All right,
existing.
so you have an
Seaport
objection to the 8
Yes,
feet.
that's
There
fine,
it
so
is.
then
No,
his objection
that's
is
my
that he
objection.
doesn't want you to increase the height,
Okay,
I don't
that's
think
we
you
got
should.
it.
it's his right to have that opinion, right?
Understand, but do you, in your professional opinion, is the additional 8 feet on those specific parcels reasonable in that area?
I mean, my professional opinion is that 8 feet, going from 52 to 60, in my professional opinion, is de minimis. And I don't think a layperson standing on the sidewalk would be able to distinguish 52 to 60 feet. That's my professional opinion. People may not agree with it.
Especially with the step backs.
Correct. So, I would agree with council here that, there are a million steps to get before we even get to an application that we would be discussing to this level of detail. But if there's an affirmative action and there's a desire to designate this individual as a conditional redeveloper and a redevelopment agreement is undertaken, which is not the subject of this hearing tonight, I can't be more clear about that, all of those items that you're bringing up, setbacks, parking, size, color, etc., all get put into a redevelopment agreement. Also, milestones, things that they have to comply with, infrastructure improvements, all of those items, which are not going to be an easy conversation. Trust me, I've been beating the crap out of this guy for a year already. So that all has to take place. So I don't disagree with the concern. It's a legitimate concern. It's just, we're not there yet.
You mean the concern about the underground?
Yeah, I 100% understand that.
we should
And
be
we've raised that
focused.
issue multiple times through this process that I don't know that you're going to be able to do it. I don't know that the DEP's going to let you do it. How many times did we bring that up?
Many times.
Yeah.
So if there's a redevelopment agreement, if in the future there was a redevelopment agreement that had underground parking in a flood zone, that would be cause for concern.
Well,
Yes, it would, and correctly so.
legally, we can't do it based on our own ordinance.
But can I just add one more thing?
Sure.
Okay, the property is also in the CAPR zone. All right, so they're gonna need DEP approval for this project. So not only are they gonna have to meet our requirements and standards, they're gonna meet DEP's requirements and standards. I've had conversation after conversation with this one prospective developer who really is interested in moving his project along. He's not anywhere near us. It's almost like, imagine you're expecting a child and the child's not here yet, okay? That's what's going on here. All we're doing is the paperwork side and the legality side of moving these 2 changes and some, a couple of
Like 3 or 4
uses,
uses, yeah.
and change it for that one area. Your Seaport zone, redevelopment zone is so large you can't expect, no one should expect to see the same thing across that whole area, right? We want to be ultra careful when we go eastward and we have more latitude to do nicer type of things or different type of things, depending on how you look at it, okay?
I think
Going
that's
westward.
that's a subject of your opinion versus my opinion.
But I'm not giving you an opinion. I'm
Well,
giving you
your
a
opinion is that you think
professional
that-
synopsis of where we are to try to help you.
Your opinion is that you think that that height would be okay, and I'm of the opinion
I
that...
haven't given you that opinion yet.
I like the Seaport redevelopment plan the way it is. I don't think we should be changing it just to accommodate a single developer. Thank you.
Back to Councilman Carvelli's point, the planning board did recognize that the height and stories were not inconsistent with the borough's master plan. Stated other way, what the amendment is proposing, the planning board found to be consistent with the master plan, just so that.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, I just
Not
wanted.
inconsistent.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure.
So I think what we really need to hear is, look, I don't think anybody's gonna object to removing the uses, right? Like, that's not even an issue.
Right.
The height is what people are going to object most about, and I think we need to understand that and not worry about underground parking or any of that other stuff at this point.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, Jerry, go ahead.
Sherry Russo, 1218 Bryward Road. I have a question, I think for the borough attorney, but I'm not positive. With the last story there, which is the 8 feet that we're talking about now, do those apartments, they're going to be apartments there, and do they require a percentage of a car per apartment still, even though it goes above? So they're all, oh, sorry.
So,
Yes.
the redevelopment plan, as we heard earlier, requires 2 parking spaces per unit.
Yep.
And we have relentlessly been consistent in that application. So,
Right.
you know, I get where you're coming from, where some in the RSIS, if it's a 1-bedroom unit, the requirement's 1.8.
Right.
And if it's a 3-bedroom unit, the RSIS is 2.3, and you can't have 0.3 for a car.
Right.
Unfortunately, we have no ability to undo
Right,
the
I
RSIS.
understand, yes.
But the redevelopment plan calls for 2 per.
And let's just pretend like I bought a, I don't know, house on 35. There's like a little 2-family there across from L Street Beach there. Is it the same for, my question is it the same for the average person for amount of parking spaces that they need per bedroom
Yes.
than it is for this? So everybody,
They
sorry.
do have different provisions, it's not per bedroom, it's so like, for example, a single-family house
Right.
has a requirement under the RSIS, whereas a garden apartment, it's a per-bedroom situation. That's a state standard, we don't really have.
But that's if you're building a house. If you're buying a house in Belmar
Right.
that doesn't have any parking, that's grandfathered. Yeah.
But so I had talked to Frank Sinelli, and he had said each bedroom would get a parking space. I was just curious if this, like let's say in my house, right now I have 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms in my house. Let's say I just wanted to put 6 bedrooms in it, just for the sake of talking here. Is it consistent for the people as it is for the developer, or is there a different standard? I don't know what the answer is.
No, it's
to that.
consistent, provided you're in a certain zone.
Okay,
Residential, if you have 6 bedrooms, you
Mhm.
have to have 2 on-site parking spaces. If you have 4 bedrooms, 2 on-site parking
That's for a
spaces.
single-family house.
Now,
Right,
if you have a
yes.
garage apartment in the back, now you have to have 4,
okay.
all right, because it's a separate residence.
And so.
That's the only
I'm
difference.
sorry. I'm sorry. And am I correct in that these apartments will all be met with adequate parking?
Okay, so-
Yes,
wait,
and we don't even know if
wait.
they're apartments
Well,
yet.
Wait, there are no apartments. This is a zone change, basically. It's a redevelopment plan amendment which changes
Right.
the standards. So again, there is no project. There will, in theory.
Well, I mean, it will be apartments, not houses, excuse my,
It could be single-family homes. if they wanted to do that. It depends on what the
I see.
proposal is.
Okay.
We don't have a development application at this time.
I
And
see.
so,
Okay.
there is no parking requirement because there is no development.
But there would be down the road for whatever it is they put there, single-family
Of course.
homes. And I just want to say also, that I believe that that is too high. This is the biggest building in Belmar, and when they came here, they had this, like, showed buildings in Belmar that they were comparing it to, and they were smaller, do you know?
The
Right
building
next
next door is
door is
9
9
stories.
stories.
It's 9 stories.
9 stories.
And how many blocks is that
Well,
building that's 9
The
stories?
massing is no,
Like,
there's no
where-
question.
I'm
But
sorry, I didn't interrupt
the
you.
massing is no question because this is,
The what is?
this area,
Uh-huh.
the massing.
Oh,
So this
massing, yeah.
area is larger. I'm not going to talk about a potential project which we do not have.
Right.
The area between obviously 10th and 8th, right?
Right.
From 35 to the tracks.
Right.
Is a larger area than that 9-story building sits on. That's not a
Right.
full block. But if you're talking about what we're talking about here
Right.
is height
Yes,
only.
height.
So for example, as we talked about at the last meeting, currently a 4-story building under the current project parameters in the redevelopment plan could be built from lot line to lot line, 8 to 10.
Right.
Right? So really what we're focused on is the height.
Yes.
So you're right, in that particular instance, that building is 9 stories.
Correct.
It's right next door.
And did they have the correct amount of parking for those?
I have no
I mean,
idea,
they
that
must,
building is
right?
probably older than me.
Right.
But, I mean, now I'm getting kind of old. so
And would that be
yeah,
like a
I'm exaggerating.
grandfather type thing?
I might have to, like, I keep thinking I'm 20, but I'm not 20.
He's still old.
Yeah. That building.
But that must have been grandfathered.
It
If was
predates
different or
me,
something,
and
right?
it's not in the redevelopment area, so that's also.
Right, so I feel like when we start talking about, well, that building is this many stories, you are really talking about apples and oranges.
Right, but I
Because-
think that was a response respectfully to you making a comment that this is the largest building in the borough. And I think that was
It's
just a
2
response.
blocks, yes, it
Right,
would
so
be,
the
right, the
massing-
top, right, the top,
But
sorry.
keep in mind, tomorrow, if the council designated a developer, an application could come forward for a 52-foot tall building going from 8th to 10th,
Right.
lot line to lot line. That's currently permitted. So I think that's what the mayor keeps focused on, is that we're talking about going from 52 feet to 60 feet.
Right,
That's the
and I,
focus.
right, and I feel,
They could put 3 buildings.
Correct, you could, you're right.
right,
There's no requirement that it's one building.
Right.
Yeah.
right, and so, I feel still that that is too tall, and I stand by that, I feel that way. And that's what's supposed to be talking about, that is what I am talking about.
Okay.
Too tall, and my question just was, I didn't know, once it goes up above a certain height, do we do less parking? I don't even know the answer to
The
that.
answer's no.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you.
John Walsh, 1101B.
Congratulations on your win.
Thank you.
Very nicely done.
Thank you, appreciate that.
And also, thank you very much on having the caroling.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was pretty nice. It was
Saw the
pretty.
video.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I guess my question is for you. So if this passes tonight, does a proposal like the one that was just kind of presented last week, does that come back?
Theoretical one that we
Yeah, that we
saw.
don't have. Does
Yeah.
that come back to the council ever? Or because we approved the height, it'll fit the height, it goes right to the planning board?
No, it has to come back to
Come back to
this
this council.
entity, which is
Okay.
acting as a redevelopment agency.
Okay.
And they would have to designate whomever as the conditional redeveloper, which would give that individual the opportunity to negotiate a redevelopment agreement, which I think is what Patrick had indicated has all the nuts and bolts of every little nuance of any aspect of a prospective project.
Okay.
After that time, then an application could be made to the planning board. But then it would go through the same process as any other application, right? It would go to the, the TDRC, for like review initially before it would even go to the planning board, but that process would be consistent with any other development project in town.
Okay, and I think some of the confusion that I even feel is that your votes last week were based on the proposal. So I think that's really where, at least some of the audience, I can tell, is that's where this is confusing, because now it's all of a sudden height, where last week, a lot of you said, I can't vote on this project. I'm not quoting you, but that's how it felt.
I understand, and I do agree
and
that
we're not allowed to talk
perhaps
about
the process got a little muddy.
Yeah.
And that's why I really just want to focus on what this piece of it is, And I am absolutely not discounting any of the concerns. I think they're all very legitimate. We're just not there yet.
Okay.
So I hate to keep saying,
No, that's okay.
wait, but it's really kind of, like, we're taking it down. I understand what some of the concerns are, but we're not to the point yet where that's something that we can address.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Maria Rondinaro, 1246 Pine Tree Way. I would just ask that you please table this for now. Something of this scale, and my issue is with height comes density. With density, I know we don't want to say it, may come increased flooding or need for more parking. We've heard from our environmental, some people from our environmental commission, they are afraid of what the impact will be if we have a project of this size. Please, let's take some more time and get input in this from our residents. We deserve that. Before I decided to have, to move into the home that we did in Belmar, we wanted to make sure that it was safe for our child. If I were expecting a child, I might get a room, make sure that the room for the child is safe, that I have a crib that's safe, that I have things that are safe. This is what we're doing. That is the planning process. So I appreciate it. I appreciate you. I hope you all have a happy and Merry Christmas. Thank you for all that you do. Please table this for the new year. Thank you.
Maria, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Did you sing at Lake Como's?
I did.
I understand you have the most beautiful
Thank
singing
you.
voice. I wish we had known.
Thank you
before.
very much. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Hello, everyone.
Hi there.
I'm Mary Brennan, 40411. I just want to start off by saying I am actually all for smart development. And I've been following this as you've gone along, and I certainly understand that you're here just for the height. However, you can't close the barn door once the horses are out, so once you agree to that height, you have to assume that you may maximize that proposal and get that height, filling the 2 blocks. So I have a few concerns about that. With, as Maria just said, with density comes more people, and I'm not sure that our aging infrastructure, maybe visually, and I'm not quite sure I agree with that the 8 feet might not make a difference, but it will allow for more numbers. And once you have this spot zoning in the redevelopment plan, in the Seaport redevelopment plan, it opens the door for that to happen everywhere else. So we can be looking at a lot more density along Main Street, along Route 35, and we have really aging infrastructure. And I think, like the veins in our body, everything's connected, and you can get a developer that will promise to do everything they have to in their area to make sure that the infrastructure is shored up, the water and sewer. However, we have problems all over town, and I can guarantee you, as you all know, it is all connected underground. So what happens here is going to affect our little 1 square mile everywhere. So I'm really concerned about the infrastructure problems that extra density might bring. And I won't mention parking or traffic because I know that would come with a particular proposal. But I have to say that you're talking about the height, and people, if there's step backs or anything else, people looking at it from Route 35. Most people won't look at it from Route 35. You're talking about that height being along 8th Avenue. The residents, visitors who walk along Main Street, people who go to Piana Plaza for the many events, are going to see a wall of height that is 60 feet high. And visually, let alone from the sunsets, I can get into the airy-fairy aesthetics and the negative space and all that. But really, it will change the character of how our town looks. If you go along any shore town, there may be buildings that are higher, and there may be shorter buildings that take up a couple of blocks. But there is no building in the towns to the south, or any of the towns to the north, except Asbury Park, that take up that many blocks and are 5 stories until you get to Pier Village. So I urge you, and believe me, I know how it feels to sit on that dais and have to weigh these pros and cons and make these kinds of decisions. And I really urge you to not open the door to this, because once you do, you're going to open the door to changing the whole character. This is sort of a crossroads, and I think that having something that large in our town will determine how our town is going to move forward in the future. So what I really urge you to do, and I appreciate all the work you put into it and the thought you put into all the decisions that you made, but I really urge you to think forward how you want this town to be for your kids and your grandkids and the people who all come after us. And that's what I'd like to say tonight, and if any particular developments come through, I'm sure I'll have a lot more to say about those, but thank you.
Thanks for coming up.
And Pat, yes, thank you for all you've done. Oh, thank you, Mary. It's been a pleasure to have you on the council. Thank you.
Mary,
Happy
thanks
holidays, everyone.
for coming up. And
Did you want to ask a question?
I was going to ask the planner a question. You can sit down and comfortable. So that question regarding infrastructure, is a very good one, and I understand where the former councilwoman is coming from. In that, a lot of times when people build these projects, the infrastructure needs water, natural gas, roads, drainage, and stuff on that immediate parcel of land, and maybe some area around those aren't addressed. But if you're connecting a new pipe to one that's clay and was put in, or wood in some cases in some municipalities years ago, you're really compounding a lot of problems that ultimately the borough is responsible to repair, and the taxpayers, obviously. Could you explain to the public, like with a project in the redevelopment area, with the underground, generally infrastructure stuff, how much can we or the planning board or whoever the appropriate body is require those infrastructure needs to be updated and improved?
Okay, so anyone who develops this particular site is going to have to provide funding to the borough for off-site improvements, because the sanitary sewer service from that site to our pump station on 8th Avenue cannot handle the extra capacity. So that's a given. And
The pump station on 8th Avenue down at Ocean Avenue.
that's correct. The water, sanitary sewer flows from the west to the east. That particular site runs under the railroad tracks, down 8th Avenue to the pump station on 8th Avenue. And then it's pumped up to Smurfit in Wall Township.
So improvement would have to be made all the way from whoever the developer is, from this site all the way down. And how does that affect, like, resurfacing the road? And then once you start digging stuff up, you find other things to do.
Right, so you can't put the 100% burden on the redevelopment, but you certainly can make him contribute their fair share. And their fair share would be some percentage, and I don't know what that would be moving forward, because that would be part of the agreement process that you're going to be going through with whoever wants to develop this site or any other site. And it doesn't matter if it's in a redevelopment zone or another zone. They all need to get what we call will serve letters for water and sewer. And that's the burden of the applicant and the builder to correct those actions so that their projects can be viable.
Chair, if I can just clear some up. Because we've been looking at the infrastructure, and we've been having meetings on water, sewer, and what we have to do. Whether that project gets built or not, 8th Avenue has to be done.
Yeah.
It was, back in 2010, it was recommended that it had to be done because there's so many problems with it. So whether that project gets done or not, we have to do 8th Avenue.
8th Avenue is a priority, as well as one or two other locations in town, but that is the #1 priority. And, with this type of application, the borough would have an opportunity for funding to offset some of the borough's costs.
Okay, anyone else? Yes, Mr. Kramer.
Gene Kramer, 4th Avenue. I just need some clarification here. what are the actual properties involved by block and lot?
Yeah, it's 87, 1, 2, and 3, I think it's.
Yeah, block 87, lots 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, why does the appended, and I guess it's made part of this ordinance, it makes reference to, what is it, Appendix A? And the title of it is, Schedule A, excuse me.
You might be looking at the prior one. So that's it, but then on the last page. So that's the wrong map, this is the correct map.
And that was put on the website at the last, prior to the introduction.
Excuse me, but the title,
Yes, the cover page also had been updated, because initially, those blocks that are shown on
it may
that.
have been updated, but I just walked in the door and now I'm reading it.
I'm trying to answer your question.
Okay, go right ahead.
So, the property is block 87, lots 1, 2, and 3. That's what the ordinance is noted, and that's the area we're talking about from 8th to 10th, from 35 to the tracks. That's what this is addressing. The initial cover sheet had the blocks of the entirety of the redevelopment area. It was determined that that would muddy the situation, so it was modified. So it's just block 87, lots 1, 2, and 3.
Is that incorporated in the text of the ordinance
Yes.
itself? On what page?
So it's incorporated by referring it to a schedule, excuse me, sorry. So it's kind of a funky way of how to incorporate it, but the way it was incorporated was by, and if you go to the second page, Mr. Kramer, the second whereas, and in the last paragraph, it directs to the amendment to, it says, with the revisions set forth in the amendment to the Seaport redevelopment prepared by Leon S. Avakian and Consulting Engineers, and in parentheses, amendment to Seaport Village redevelopment plan attached here to as Schedule A. So it's referring to the attachment to incorporate the full meets and bounds of whatever the zone is that's being affected.
That's fine, but Appendix A is incorrect.
Correct, in the one that you're holding.
Oh, excuse me. I just grabbed a copy of this out on the desk in the front.
Now,
I object to you presenting an ordinance that refers to a document, incorporates it, as you mentioned, but the document itself, the appendix or Schedule A, is incorrect. Procedurally, was it republished, was this ever published in the newspaper?
the ordinance was published in the newspaper. Mr. Kramer was correct. The cover page that was introduced and that was published was never adjusted with the amendment, so it doesn't reflect the appropriate block as being adjusted. Now,
Can we go home early?
the cure essentially would be to start over, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry. Because the way it was introduced with the block and the block on the cover sheet of the Schedule of Life or the amendments to the redevelopment plan, it wasn't correct, therefore it wasn't properly noticed.
So in January, we got to
Do a first reading.
reintroduce it, go back to planning board?
Correct. So we have to start the process over again, introduce it on first reading on, I believe, January 4th is the first meeting, goes back to the planning board. April, are we aware of when the next planning board meeting is?
I believe it's January 24th.
I'm sorry?
24th.
24th, the next, so we would introduce it, if we introduced it on the first reading of January 4th, and then the January 24th meeting, it would be presented to the planning board for a consistency hearing, and thereafter it would be introduced on second reading in the first February meeting, which is scheduled for February 1st.
That's what we have to do. So what do we want to do, table this tonight, or just not vote on it?
We have to restart the ordinance is killed as being improperly noticed for, to amend the cover page of Schedule I.
All right, so.
No, the ordinance, technically
Just leave it to
speaking,
the guys.
Borough Council doesn't have the jurisdiction to hear it on second reading because of improper notice.
All right, April, we'll move on.
Can we finish that?
That's it. We have to make a motion to close the public hearing.
Well, there's still more people that are speaking.
Well, no,
So
it's a dead ordinance, right?
it's, correct, yeah. It's a dead ordinance, there's no public hearing on an ordinance that doesn't exist.
Okay, so
That's
Okay,
correct.
so it doesn't exist,
Yep.
so we can move on. Okay. All right, April.
So then the last one is second reading and public hearing on ordinance 2021-37. This is an ordinance amending and supplementing Chapter 3, establishing tourism fees. It's over for public comment. If anyone would like to speak, please step forward, state your name and address. Seeing none, can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
And a motion to adopt ordinance 2021-37.
Motion.
Second.
Councilman Brennan?
Yes.
Councilman Long? Yes. Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Councilman McCracken?
Yes.
Councilman Carvelli?
Yes.
Now we're on to public session. If anyone would like to speak, please step forward and state your name and address first.
Yes, Linda, come on up.
Linda Sharkus, 4th Avenue. I want to take the opportunity tonight to thank Michael Nunes for reporting over the years on our town. Michael has been given a great opportunity for his career, and I wish you all the best as you move forward. Thank you.
Yes, Jerry, go ahead.
Gerald Buckafusco, 409 Fifth Avenue in Belmar. I'd like to make a comment about the dead ordinance. You may remember at the May 4th, 2021 council meeting, I presented a petition opposing the Mediterranean project. The petition contains 611 signatures, 447 signatures from Belmar residents and voters. At that time, our opposition was based on the following. Number one, the overall size of the project is out of character with the small town atmosphere of the borough. Number two, the project falls within the Seaport redevelopment area or zone, but does not conform to the requirements of the Seaport redevelopment plan in three respects: building height, number of required parking spaces, and amount of impervious coverage. Number three, entrances and exits for the complex are proposed on Route 35 North and West Railroad Avenue leading to 10th Avenue. These areas currently experience heavy traffic year-round, and this project will substantially increase the traffic and cause delays on north and southbound lanes of Route 35. So here we are, 7 months later, faced essentially with the same project, which I will add was presented at the prior meeting, the same meeting that the amendment for the plan was proposed. I think in the future, those types of things should be avoided. I mean, it could have the confusion that I think reigned with the comments on the ordinance was driven by the fact that the developer was here at the same time the ordinance was introduced. So I think in the future, maybe someone should look at that and avoid that from happening. But tonight we were here to voice our opposition because the council has decided it should change the Seaport redevelopment plan. And regardless of what might be said, in my opinion, the motivation for the change is to meet the needs of the property owner and the developer, rather than having the developer change the plans to comply with the existing Seaport redevelopment plan. And once again, we're here, residents and taxpayers, and we're limited to voicing our comments just minutes before the vote on this amendment, which of course is not going to happen. But I will add, though, that the discussion that happened here is the type of discussion that is good and should have happened before the second reading of the ordinance. And that's the gist of my comments tonight, is that the council does not give the public enough opportunity to weigh in on these types of matters. And I think, we all could learn something if we would just step back and perhaps have an open session on these very important issues before we have a first reading and a second reading. And I hope the council, and I'll have to, I guess, extend this comment to sometime in January when we actually do the hearing. I hope at that point they will take the time to consider and discuss all the comments made before them, all right, before they have a final vote. Lastly, the ordinance states in one part that the borough believes the adoption of the amendment to the Seaport redevelopment plan is in the best interest of the borough. In light of the fact that this is going to come up again, I still think this would be an opportunity for someone on the council, perhaps the mayor or Councilman McCracken or Councilman Corvelli, to discuss how is this amendment in the best interests of Belmar. Because I don't think I've heard that from anyone on the council. I've heard it from professionals, I've heard it from Russo, but I haven't heard that from anyone on the council. So,
Well, everybody has their own opinion. You have yours and we have ours.
but I'd just like to know how does this benefit Belmar?
So Jerry, can you please stand up?
Yes, sir.
So, since you called out my name, I had several comments to make about this project tonight, and I was fully planned on making them. And obviously, there is a technical problem, and we're going to be coming back in January and do that, where I fully plan on sharing my opinions on the ordinance. We don't have a project that exists, but since we were talking about a hypothetical project, if our legal counsel asks us, that allows us, maybe we'll be able to make some comments on that too. I also want to point out that there's not only one right way to do things, and just because you don't do things a certain way doesn't mean the way things that are being done is wrong. In fact, oftentimes there's more than one right way to do things, and I respect your opinion. You have views on process that are different than the way things have been done in this borough for a very long time. But, we sit up here and we had an ordinance that was introduced. We had 2 weeks to get emails, make phone calls, see people on the street, see people in restaurants, all that type of thing. Members of the public had 2 weeks to review the ordinance thoroughly, prepare their comments to come here tonight. And I can't speak for anyone else in this dais, but I didn't come into this meeting tonight with my mind made up. As a matter of fact, if you remember when I voted last time, I voted to extend this process so that we could have public input. So, there are probably different ways, which are all good, to include the public in this. But the way we're doing it isn't wrong either.
I never suggested that. But if you saw it that way, that was not my intention. Okay, I agree with you. There are many different ways to do things. All right, the most important thing is that we do it the right way. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anyone else?
Mark Pfeiffer, 319 Fifth Avenue. This might be something for Jim, you know, as the leaves have come down and you're walking around town, you're looking up and you're seeing a lot of dead branches, branches that are hanging from the trees. So I'm wondering if we have a plan to have somebody inspect that and maybe notify the homeowners that work needs to be done. And would that fall under the Shade Tree Commission or DPW?
Yeah, the Shade Tree Commission has done a hazardous tree inventory. Professional was hired to do that, and those residents who had trees that need to be pruning or removed or further evaluated were notified already, right? That letter went out. And then, as part of their budget, a second phase of a tree inventory in town is being done, and that's inventorying all trees in the in Belmar that are in the public right-of-ways or public parks or stuff like that. It's not a hazardous tree inventory, it's just a tree inventory, so how many elms, how many maples, all this type of thing, and that process is underway. So residents that do have hazardous trees have been notified, and you can add to that.
Yes, we've sent out letters, there's a permit process, and they've been notified. We continue to work with the Shade Tree Commission on all the problems with trees in town. We also have a grant, Shade Tree has a grant that they're utilizing, just like Councilman McCracken said. So we're working on that. We've sent additional letters out this week, I believe, April.
Yes, there was 3 other properties that were identified that got letters this week.
So we've been working towards that goal.
So Mark, if you didn't get a letter, that's a good thing.
I'm sorry?
It's a good thing if you didn't get a letter.
Yeah. So do we have a follow-up process then? I mean, so we send them a letter if they don't do action. I mean, I'm a block captain for Fifth Avenue, and I see trees and, you know, I mean, some dangerous looking situations. And I know this because before we moved to Belmar, one of my neighbors, you know, after a snowfall, he's out in front of his house, the branch came down and it killed him instantly. So some of these are in bad shape, so it's just like the follow-up. We do have block captains. Like I said, I'm the one for Fifth Avenue. If you want us to do any follow-up, I'm not going to volunteer other people, but that's something we could work with the zone chiefs and just maybe notify them, and they could notify somebody in town just to make sure everything was covered.
I mean, that sounds fine to me. I'm not the liaison to community policing. Greg Glesman is sitting right behind you. He's a very active member of the Shade Tree and very committed. I will admit to you that the borough had gaps in processes in the past with following up, and one of the things that Ed has worked very hard on with his team, Ed and April both, and also the Shade Tree Commission, is to make sure we have good systems in place. There were a lot of manual systems in place, and they were maybe not the best. So, you know, transition to some electronic systems so that, you know, if we get to the next step in code enforcement or someone from public safety or whatever needs to be involved, then there's an opportunity, you know, there's a better system.
Yeah, I just think the follow-up is what we need.
Yeah, we do need that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes.
Angela Pfeiffer, 319 Fifth Avenue, we're keeping it in the family. I understand the ordinance is dead, but when it comes back, I'm going to be on vacation. So I just wanted to, there was a lot of confusion as to exactly what, because I thought we were voting on the project, you were voting on the project too. So we're clearly voting, well, we're not voting on anything, but the height, okay? And I want to echo what Mary Brennan said. It really changes the character of this town and who we are. And this is something that's so permanent. This is not, hey, we're going to paint the outside of Borough Hall, and if we don't like the color, we can repaint it. Once it's there, there's no going back, Okay, once we open up this door, there is no going back. And I don't understand how we're saying there is no proposal, but there is a proposal. We all saw it. And if there wasn't a proposal, then why did we change the Seaport development plans? It was 52 feet. If there's no proposal, why are we changing it to 60? Did we just wake up one morning and say, let's make it 60? The proposal was made for a reason, and it was to suit this design. And even if it's not this developer, it can be another developer that comes in and says, I can go 60 feet. And it's not 60 feet for just a pretty design. It's probably adding 50 more apartments. If there's 260 apartments, 4 floors versus 5 floors, I'm thinking that's roughly another 50 apartments. And it's apartments. It's not people that are invested in Belmar. It's 1-bedroom apartments. These people are gonna come and go, okay? You know, we all sing the praises when we put in 1-bedrooms because we say, it's not gonna be a burden on the school. Guess what? I want kids coming to the school. I want this to be a family town, okay? We're a town of 5,000 people, roughly. You're adding 260 apartments, 2 people to an apartment, 500 more residents, air quotes, of Belmar. That's a 10% increase of our population. For people that are going to come and go, they might be here in the summer, they might be here weekends. This really changes the character. I want families moving in. I want to see more children in our school. I wish I moved here sooner when I raised my kids here. I moved here after my kids got out of college. Okay? So I'm going to ask the council, just think about it, okay? We don't need to go 60 feet. We really don't. We don't need to have that density. And thank you so much for the angle parking. I live on 5th. When I head to Main Street, there's the angle parking by Jersey Mike's. It's a disaster. Occasionally I go to Anchor and I keep telling Mark, don't park there, don't park there. It's a hazard. So I appreciate that, but I won't be here in January, but please, think about this. It's the character of our town. It's our future. And I appreciate everything you do. Merry Christmas.
So I just want to say that I know, again, this is all in the ether because there's no proposal. It's a dance, right? Yes, there could be a proposal, and it seems fitting that, for me at least, that we go to this height. But what I can share with you is that from the first time that I saw the renderings that you saw for the potential building that might be there, was that they were all rental units. And I know that there are other people on the council that share my concern. And we do have the opportunity to, once we get to the point of negotiating the developer's agreement, to stipulate certain things like that. They don't get to tell us.
I get that, but once we approve the 60 feet, Councilman, it's done. Why not?
That's not correct.
Well, they wouldn't need a variance. They could build something 60 feet.
Right, but I think the comment, the 60 feet is one thing, but the ownership of the units is something totally different.
Oh, yes, I agree.
Okay, so that's what I think was.
That's what I'm addressing.
Right.
I'm sorry.
I'm addressing the form of ownership and the bringing of residents into this town.
Right.
Jim, you can comment, because I know we got a conversation. I was just going to say, and Jim, if we stipulated in the developer's agreement that these have to be owned units, likely they would maybe be have more square feet than an apartment?
I don't know. That I don't know.
Yeah, this is all hypothetical.
I mean, what I will say is that going through a redevelopment process, unlike traditional zoning, you do get to dictate homeownership versus rentals. Where if it was just traditional zoning, you do not have the ability to do that. So you are able to make those stipulations in a developer's agreement, but I don't really know how that impacts the square footage of the unit.
That's not a fair question.
Right, and then we're getting into the weeds of it, but again, I'm gonna stick to the height, because I listened to what you said, stick to the height, stick to the height. Why not leave it at the 52? And then when a proposal comes in, if they want to go a little bit higher and it makes sense with certain, we can always consider it then, but to give a blanket, it's okay to go 60 feet, is a little scary to me. It's overwhelming. I come over that bridge practically every day. I don't want to feel like I'm in Pure Village. I really don't. I'm in Belmar. I love Belmar. So it's just something to
I just
think
want
about.
to make one thing clear. I understand your sentiment, and I'm not opining one way or the other, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, but what I will say is because this is a redevelopment plan and not a traditional zoning ordinance, if the requirement's 52 and the applicant goes more than, any applicant goes more than 5 feet above that 52, it's not allowed to proceed. You're not allowed to give it a height variance for that because it's a
Okay,
redevelopment.
good, then let's leave it at 52.
So the plan would have to be opened and amended. The application would then have to be rescinded and resubmitted. And I'm not saying that one way or the other,
I
but it's a
understand.
different process than traditional.
I understand. In that case, I'd leave it at 60. And then one more quick question. The first proposal that we saw tonight, there were 3 different options, and one of them included no retail, which would have given them sufficient parking space. But you indicated that we can't have anything on Main Street with no retail?
So the way the redevelopment plan reads, especially like along Main Street, is that the goal is mixed use, retail, residential over retail. There's provisions that don't allow residential development on the first floor, because the goal is along Main Street, which is differentiated between that strip versus other areas within the redevelopment area, that it's to be mixed use. That's why. So, either, in order to eliminate all that commercial is inconsistent with the goals of the redevelopment plan along Main Street. By requiring that retail, they're not able to adequately park it, which is one of the reasons why, which they can certainly avail themselves with, and they would have to meet the FAR, which they don't meet. So it's like as was said earlier, it's kind of a dance to figure out how the project would fit into the parameters and in that location. And in this particular instance, and in all honesty, this is a conversation that we've been having with this developer for a year now, that the project is a little too big and it needs to be pared down a little bit.
I was just wondering, if you look at the bigger picture, there's a lot of open, empty spaces on Main Street, empty retail spaces. So maybe a little bit, not bringing in more retail might be a good idea, and then we satisfy the parking. I mean, I would be okay, if that proposal didn't have any retail space, but it met all the parking requirements. Wouldn't that actually help some of the retailers now? Because there's a lot of empty space on Main Street right now. So I didn't know if that was, I just didn't understand that there had to be retail. So, okay, thank you.
Yes, Joe.
The other John Walsh, B Street. There was no proposal, is that what you're saying? Correct. Okay, well, there's 2 guys in the back that I saw propose this stuff here 2 weeks ago. Are they here for our meeting, or is that?
So what I said was, there's no development application proposed at this time. There was a presentation of something that could potentially, should the governing body avail, act affirmatively on the ordinance, which is now going to be pushed to January, and they get designated as the redeveloper. But at this point, that's a theoretical idea of and what would potentially go there. But there's no formal proposal. There's no formal development application. So talking about below grade parking, access points, these things, we're not at that point yet. Yeah.
And the other thing was, Councilman brought up about, well, you could talk to us out in the public. I am out in the public more than anybody here. And there's 3 guys out there that could tell you, I'm all over the place. I see those 3 guys. I never see anybody else. So I would love to discuss it, and believe it, they probably hide from me when they see me, because I want to discuss something. So when you say that, that's being disingenuous. You're not, you want to have something, I never see any of yous. The three people I see, I don't want to point them out. So that's disingenuous when you say, oh, you can talk to me in here. Well, if I ever see you, and I'm being honest, Eddie will tell you, I'm all over the place. All right? All right. Have a good holiday. We'll see you in January.
Yes, Joe.
Merry Christmas, Mayor. First of all, I'd just like to tell Council President Juan, thanks for your service. We all serve in one capacity or another. We all appreciate it, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And the only other question I have is, 4 times we were told at the last council meeting that there would be no public session at the planning board meeting to comment on this. Only about a half dozen residents showed up. There were probably a lot more than that wanted to.
Well, I wasn't there, number one, and number two, I can't speak to how the attorney for the planning board handled that meeting, but I will say, legally, it is not a public hearing.
And I'm just going to back her up on that. Legally, she's correct. It's only a consistency
So they were
hearing.
being generous to us, basically.
Wasn't there as well, so, but if
Yeah.
It's up to the chairman.
I was at that meeting. I'm the borough engineer, not the borough planner. But I was at that meeting. I was asked by counsel for the board and the chairman if I could answer some questions for the board members, which I did. And I strictly answered questions, didn't give a presentation because I'm not at that level at this point with this project. I'm not proposing anything, that type of thing. I'm trying to remember if they opened it to the public. I think they opened it to the public and allowed a couple people to ask questions, but not about that proposal, just about the height and the stories. So yes, they did. I don't think it was anticipated. I know I didn't anticipate it, but I was at that meeting and I did answer some questions.
All right. So it's not standard procedure.
It should not have happened.
Okay, thank you. Merry Christmas.
Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Kramer.
Eugene Kramer, 4th Avenue. Somebody just reminded me that it said enough. Excuse me, I guess a little bit off the subject of what everybody's talking about here tonight. The agenda. You got a reorganization meeting coming up, I guess right after the first of the year. I request the mayor and council perhaps to take a look at the form of the agenda which we have been following here. I much prefer, and I think it's much fairer, the form of the agenda that's actually in the municipal code. It's superior to this, and for a number of reasons. But what I'm asking you to do is before you adopt at the reorganization meeting the form of the agenda that's to be followed at all the meetings for that year, that you take a look at the borough's code. That form of the agenda that's in there spells out the decorum that's expected of people that attend the meeting. Also, it lays out how a consent agenda is supposed to be handled. In plain English, it's superior to what we're using here now. Now you're going to ask me what's superior about it? I'll tell you what's superior about it. What's in the borough's code, the form of the agenda that's in the borough's code, was adopted by ordinance, not by resolution. And the public had the opportunity to comment on it. Now, I know at your reorganization meeting, the public has never been provided the opportunity to provide comment on the form of the agenda. If you feel that your agenda format is great, it was better or superior than what's actually codified in the borough's code, then present it as an ordinance so that you can listen to let the public participate in that process. Thank you.
Patrick, you can take a look at that first. See if it needs any changes.
Sherry Russo, 1218 Bryward Road in Belmar. I understand that we're starting the process over. I understand how that goes and all. I just wanted to say that you now have more time and a longer period of time to think about everything. Everything that's before you, everything that's coming, what people say. You have more time to be out in public. You have more time to receive emails. You have more time for everything. And that I really hope that you take this opportunity and also think about, you know, putting it on a vote. Like somebody talked tonight about that. The ground wouldn't break till 18 months. I mean, we have an election coming before that. Perhaps we'd like to put it on the ballot. You know, I'm all for like letting voters decide. I understand in elections now, we are very, very, very close and everything. So it's really split. So it's not like, well, 90% of the people love everything going on here. And so I hope that you will find it in your heart and find it in, to know what you're thinking about during this period of time, that this will be the biggest building in Belmar, you know, and so that perhaps like you would be interested in putting it to a vote. And that's all. Thank you. And Merry Christmas to the whole town.
Merry Christmas. Anyone else? April?
I have a motion to close the public session and adjourn.
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
All right. Merry Christmas, everyone.